Anyways, my name is Stu Townsley. I'm the Deputy for Project Management for San Francisco District Corps of Engineers. My boss was supposed to be here, Lieutenant Colonel Cunningham, but unfortunately one of his kids had an accident today, so he had to peel off to go take care of that. So, but he did want to be here. He was sort of guilty about it. I said, go, take care of family first. Because that's the first thing. I don't know how many people we have in the room, but we got a lot. And that's cool. Because this
capacity. This is over capacity.
Are you the fire marshal?
I'm calling the fire marshal now. There's too many people in this room. This is unsafe. It's a violation of the law.
Let's work for Joe. You work for the refinery?
So, I think our librarian called it out and said if you're feeling uncomfortable or unsafe, there's a couple exits you can take right now. I'm hoping we can, have this public meeting because I believe these things are very important in terms of process. Okay? So I'll answer those questions. There's a lot of people in this room. I'm sure there's a lot of people who want to ask questions and make comments. And the more interruptions we get, the less likely we are to be able to get through the crowd. So I would ask you to be courteous to those who are speaking, including me, so we can get through this. What I'm proposing to do tonight is we have a few slides that I'm going to give you just sort of as a background. I'm going to get through them as quickly as I possibly can. Then what I'd like to do is allow people who have questions, as opposed to statements, an opportunity to ask a few questions, okay? And then we'll get to the statements. I'm going to make one other point. We will attempt to capture every statement you make verbally. But the reality is you really don't want to leave it to us to capture the specifics about your statement, so I strongly encourage you to write those things down. Who's got my cards?
So right here.
Right over here, okay?
In the back.
So, any process questions? I have a hand waving over here. Yes, ma'am.
I want to know, are there any empty seats that someone can sit in if they're available up front?
One right here.
Show us where, please.
One right here.
Question, if you want to speak, do you have to fill out this card?
No.
Or is this for sending things?
No, but again, we'll try to capture your comments, but for us to process them well, it's far better for you to write specifically what you want in there as opposed to ask us to interpret what you're saying, because we can't take notes as fast as you talk. Another process question.
When is the deadline for turning in comments that will be considered?
So it depends on what deadline you're talking about. And so here's the thing. Any major project like this has to clear both our NEPA process and it has to clear the CEQA process. NEPA, National Environmental Policy Act. CEQA is the California one. We do not have CEQA for this project, and we don't have a lead entity for CEQA, so that process is still to occur.
And no money.
So money is a different issue. We can talk a little bit about that. Okay? So, anyways, there's a lot of process time still to play out for the SF Beta Stockton study. All right. Any other process questions? I got a hand over here, or are you just waving high? Oh, she's waving high. All right. One more.
What was it you said about the Stockton, because they are the lead agency and they decide. How come?
I'm sorry?
Repeat what you said about Stockton.
I said, we don't, the SF Beta Stockton study, that's the title of the study, does not yet have a lead CEQA agency. So we haven't even started CEQA for this process.
Who are the candidates?
We don't know. Just keep that in mind. All right. Again, my boss, Lieutenant Colonel Cunningham, couldn't make it. Family thing came up. I'm Stu Townsley, the Deputy for Project Management. So let me just walk through. I called this a meeting on the dredging program because I had a meeting earlier this year that maybe a lot of you attended, some of you certainly did, that was focused on doing a dredge material management plan effort to look at all the dredging we do in the San Francisco Bay and how we might beneficially reuse sediment. Okay? That meeting had a lot of attendees who wanted to talk SF Beta Stockton. So in all fairness to the folks who want to talk about more of our program than just the study, I wanted to have a just broad public meeting about what we do as the Corps of Engineers and dredging in New York. So, this is sort of hard to read, but the authorized channels, this is the Stockton, that's Sacramento, and then you have various other sort of channels in here. Congress has authorized us and appropriates money for us to dredge those channels. Okay? Let me get through this. You're gonna have... Ma'am, can I just, yeah, I'm going to try to do this. There's a lot of people who want to talk, and if I stop at every point, we're not going to give everybody an opportunity to do it. Okay?
Why don't you schedule a bigger venue to take more comments? There's more than 100 people in this room, and the limit is 100. What do you say about that?
You don't have the floor.
More people out here in the lobby.
Please don't disrupt the meeting.
You guys are being
Quit
duped.
disrupting.
If you allow them to take comments from this downsized meeting, you legitimate their effort to squelch your input. This should be scheduled at a larger venue with more notice.
Stop disrupting.
Listen, we searched all over. I searched all over. There was nothing available till next year. They wanted it over here. So I told Shoshana. Shoshana went back to him. It was his duty to get a place, and he ended up with this. This would be a place I would not recommend. So we didn't have any time, and there wasn't anything available. If they want to come to Rodeo Hill School, we'll give them that. If you want to come to Crockett, we'll get that. And it would be big enough to hold all these people. But this is what he turned up with. Everybody else did what we could. This is what you got. And we're happy that there's this many people, because this is what democracy is all about. It's to say no to what we know is dangerous.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. So the Corps of Engineers is authorized and gets appropriations to dredge all these channels in the bay, and we pull, on average, about 3 million cubic yards of material out of the bay. Okay. If you've been following BCDC's rewrite to their plan, BCDC acknowledges that dredging sediment is going to have tremendous value for those of us around the bay when we're going to have to deal with sea level rise. So that DMMP meeting was focused on getting public input into how we could potentially beneficially use dredge material for flood protection, ecosystem restoration, and other activities. Okay? That's what we were trying to do.
When you use acronyms like BCDC, would you please explain to us what they are?
Fair enough. Bay Conservation Development Commission. They are the agency that is chartered under NOAA Coastal Zone Management, NOAA National Oceanographic, whatever. Yeah, thank you, somebody. I'm hoping there's a dial a friend thing going on here because I'm going to try to do this right, but I may not. Anyways, but they're the ones who, so they're responsible for basically administering and overseeing coastal zone activities. Okay, so there's an entity out there that believes dredge material is going to be valuable, you know, and they're talking to us. This is our program. We do some other stuff up and down the coast, but I just wanted to give you the oversight of what our program was. Next slide. We do this under all these kinds of things. NEPA, National Environmental Policy Act. We have a 10-year NEPA thing right now that's going from 2015 to 2024. So we've cleared that. We had public comment, all that kind of stuff. We have an environmental assessment. It was in 15 May. We have Endangered Species Act. So we regularly consult with agencies that are responsible for those endangered species. We work with under the Clean Water Act. There's a state water board that gets some rights that are given through EPA to make sure that what we're doing has no or minimal impacts on water and water quality. I talked about the Coastal Zone Management Act and a consistency notification, i.e., is our program consistent with the Bay Conservation Development Commission's plan. The long-term management strategy is a group that came together in the early 90s to start planning for what we could do with dredge material, to minimize environmental impacts and to find opportunities to do good things for the environment. That agreement, that group consists of the Regional Water Board, the Bay Conservation Development Commission, so I'm going to go BCDC from now because I've said it about 3 times and I hope everybody gets it. EPA, State Lands Commission, and the Corps of Engineers. Okay, so really all the regulatory agencies. We continue to work through that group to find the best opportunities to use dredge material for the benefit of citizens around the bay.
Are there any entities that are public entities that are part of the decision-making process? Other than these ones that you talked about that come from the community itself, not necessarily from New York, on these boards?
When you say public entity, you mean?
I don't think civil servants, I mean like the people who are standing in this room.
No.
Is there any part of the process that is not government
All these processes have opportunity for public input.
input, but what about the decision-making body? Does it
Yes,
include
and
any
environmental
people?
justice, you know?
Yeah, is there any part of this process that institutionalizes a role for people in this room to have part of the decision-making, or is it all these government agencies and
It's a great question, actually. But I think what the right answer is no, other than providing public comment.
Thank you.
And that's the way both the federal and the state laws have been set up.
This is the fundamental problem about why we're here. It's not just to get input, it's
I-
to actually have
Let's hold questions until the end.
I appreciate the comment. What I can tell you is I am a public servant. I work for the government and have to follow the laws that governments provide me. Okay? That's my job.
Well, the public servant is to serve the public.
Hold the question.
So anyways, the federal standard is a congressional law that says the way that we dredge should be the least cost, environmentally practical way to do dredging. Okay? That's the backdrop of the laws that we have to work with to deliver our dredging program. Next slide. We will post this presentation on our website so you can get all that information.
What's that web address?
We'll give it to you later. We'll show it to you. It's not a pie chart, it's a bar chart, and what we're going to do here is, this is basically our plan for what we're going to dredge in the 2020 cycle. Now, the federal fiscal year is a weird one. It starts October 1st and goes to September 30th. So the 2020 plan is using fiscal $20 to do it that Congress appropriates. I will say, however, almost all of the dredging in the bay is paid for through a user fee, okay? And it isn't a taxpayer appropriation. So Congress set up the dredging program. Anybody who uses these channels and imports goods pays a fee into the Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund. And for the first time since 1988, this past year, we actually spent all the dollars we collected this year. There is a huge surplus in the Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund.
What? Phillips?
So I'm sorry, ma'am.
Oh,
I'm
really?
sorry. I'm sorry. We're going to try to do this. You're going to get your time to do it. Okay. So basically, the green things in there describe environmental windows as described, given to us by other agencies, both state and federal, when they think it's reasonably acceptable for us to be dredging. Next slide. I talked a little bit about the DMNP in the first one. Basically, this is our attempt, working with a bunch of other agencies and the public, to get input on how to beneficially reuse dredge material to improve the ecosystem and around the bay. Okay? It's going to take a while. And we're under no obligation at this stage of the game to do it. I purposely held a public meeting because I believe public input into government processes is a valuable and important thing to do, and I want to uphold my role as a public servant in doing everything I can to capture your input into our processes.
Oh, stop it.
I'm sorry, Dredge Material Management Plan, keep reminding me with my acronym. I've got an 18-year training in the Army to use acronyms, and I apologize for that with the Corps of Engineers. Next slide. This is what I think most of you are here to talk about, which is the San Francisco to Stockton deepening project. It was a deep draft navigation study that started in the early 2000s. Actually, the authority that Congress gave us to do it dates back to 1964. So it's been around for a long, long time. The original scope of it, as it says, went from the bay all the way to Stockton. And in essence is a deepening of a channel that we regularly dredge anyways. We get Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund dollars, appropriations to do that. The Port of Stockton is the sponsor. Okay. Our website, unfortunately, had a few little hiccups in it that we captured over the past couple days, and it said that Contra Costa County was a project sponsor. They are not. It also said Western Petroleum was a sponsor. They are not. So, no, that was, we screwed it up. I tell you, we screwed that one up. We should have caught it, we didn't. One of the things that happened with this study is about 7 or 8 years ago, we had a lot of planning studies and not much capacity across the country for the Corps of Engineers. And so we made a decision for all 39 districts to shuffle some studies around. This guy happened to be one of them and got sent to Wilmington District. Okay, Wilmington, North Carolina. Okay.
That just seems like highly error. Would you enlighten us how that error occurred?
Wait on 20.
Dredging a body of water.
We'll get to it. If you have a question, So I'm gonna finish the talk, do questions, and then let people go on statements, okay? That's what we're gonna do. We took a look at it, obviously doing additional work in the Delta in ecologically fragile area is a little bit difficult, and so we rescoped it, so it came basically to SF Beta Avon, okay? Contra Costa has been with us through it, but has not been a partner. What that means is they've been supportive of the process, but they haven't been a cost share partner, okay?
Yeah, we're gonna change that.
There's a difference. And you're free to do that. Basically, the economics also, the first pencil we did, weren't all that great given the cost of doing the balance of the dredging all the way to Stockton, or the deepening to it, and then the environmental complexity. So, next slide. Basically, this is the sort of the recommended plan that we came out of with the first phase of this study. Remember, we haven't even cleared CEQA. We haven't even started CEQA yet. There's a lot more to go for this study. Here, you can stand over here, so I don't walk over you, okay? Basically, the project says we're gonna deepen the existing authorized federal channel, which we dredge to 35 feet right now to 38 feet. Okay, that's the project. Okay, we anticipate that's going to pull about 1.4 million cubic yards of additional material out one time, and then we will have maintenance dredging, which will have a much smaller annual amount
Where are you gonna put it?
for it. Okay, and we're going to build a sediment trap in it. We have there's some rock substrate in occasional spots, but most of this is mud. Okay, it's sediment that's generated from the Sacramento San Joaquin system that's coming down. And by the way, the design of that system, the flood control system in both on the Sacramento River and the San Joaquin River, all the way down, was designed to handle the material coming out of hydraulic mining in this state in the late 1800s. Okay. We ran a lot of sediment through the system for 100 years, but they designed the levees of the system to be very close together and have high velocities. The faster water moves, the more stuff it carries. When it gets into the bay, the velocities slow down and it deposits that sediment, and did for over 100 years as planned when it was originally designed. Now we don't have sediment in the system, nowhere near as much. And so what's happening is we are starting to scour some of the upstream areas and bring it down here. So it's yet another complexity when you start looking at the overall hydraulics of the whole system that extends, you know, from the northern extent of the Sacramento River all the way down to the San Joaquin. So one of the things as we do studies is we don't just isolate and look at the narrow little piece of it. We have to look at, and we try very hard to look at all the things associated that may impact what we're proposing to do. Okay. We also already have two beneficial placement sites that have been in play for some time. We put a significant 40% of the material we dredge or more every year goes into wetland restorations at Montezuma or Cullinan Ranch. There are two more that are in the process for permitting right now in the bay to accept more sediment. These become highly productive wetlands, something that we lost around the bay. So that's one of the things that you get as a benefit out of a dredging program, just so you know. So go to the next slide. Actually, no, because we test the material every year for toxicity.
Actually,
And we
yes.
don't find very much there, and when we do, we have to specially handle it. The reality is the vast majority of the material that we dredge is clean. It's sediment coming down.
That's not deep water dredging.
Next slide. So, initial placement sites, we're going to use Cullinan and Montezuma. We do take some material to SF Dodds, which is outside of the Fowlerons. We do that under agreement under the LTMS to minimize the amount of material we have placed in bay, and we've been doing that for a long time. It's a 50-some-odd mile journey to get out beyond where the continental shelf is.
LTMS.
Do what's LTMS?
I'm sorry, long-term management strategy, Dodds, San Francisco Deep Ocean Disposal Site. You're doing good. Your voice is in my head.
Now somebody else's.
Now I know, it's all good, it's all good. So anyways, again, I've already talked about beneficial use. The maintenance that we look, this is pretty standard of what we're doing already, about 48,000 cubic yards. You know, out of Bull's Head Reach and about 175 out of Canola. Okay? And then there's a trap, which is basically capturing the sediment that comes in the system that's about 9,000 cubic yards. We believe, through the very early parts of the study, this is going to reduce the overall cost of our dredging program, which is the last piece of it. All right, next slide. So we're going to use a clamshell dredge as opposed to a hopper dredge. Basically, that's a big bucket, and they're big, 15, 16 feet. Go down, grab material, pick it up, put it into a scow. Basically, you know, a flat boat that has a hole in the middle of it, put a bunch of mud and material in there. We move it over to either Montezuma or Cullinan, and when we offload that through a hydraulic pumping system and put it in the wetlands. That's basically what we do with it. We dredge in compliance with biological opinions and all other environmental laws. We coordinate regularly with all of our stakeholders and partners about what we're doing with our dredging program. We also have a programmatic requirement. Section 106 refers to historical and native properties. I think I got that about right. There's some things I'm not an expert on. But basically, we coordinate through the state to make sure we're not harming historical or Native American properties or artifacts when we do our work. Okay. That's a requirement under federal law, so we do that, and we're committed to beneficial reuse of material. Next. Okay, so we are in the process, or may have, you know, of sending this report to headquarters. We have a multi-tiered review process, so once it goes to headquarters, they look at it and make sure we did it all right, and so on and so forth. There's a 30-day NEPA review scheduled in January. We still have to get the programmatic agreement for cultural resources, the Section 106 stuff. That's still yet to come. NEPA, National Environmental Policy Act. Okay. And then right here, we don't have a sponsor and we don't have a schedule for CEQA. We have no project without CEQA. I'm just going to be straight up about that. No project without CEQA. California Environmental Quality Act. Okay. Then, if we get through all those things, then we go into pre-construction engineering and design, and we refine the design elements, we refine our material management processes, we validate the environmental issues associated with it. In other words, before we do a single piece of work deep in the channel, we got a bunch of other stuff still stacked up to do. Okay, so there's a lot of time to capture public comment. All right, and that's what it means. Construction to be determined pending CEQA, design completion, and congressional appropriation. We don't have an appropriation to do this yet.
That's right.
So,
ends in
Can you say
2019.
what your motivation is for this dredging?
You get, do you have a process question?
A question about this schedule. So given the schedule, what is the deadline for written comments?
Okay, you're cheating now because we're shutting other questions down. And,
Okay, right.
I have a question.
all right, now let me finish. I only have. Let's go to the next slide. So,
There's the
this is why we're here,
there's the
for your questions and your comments.
I have a proposal, Stu.
Yes, ma'am.
Wait, did we just shout out? 'Cause I
Yes, I have a proposal. I have a proposal.
Okay.
So I'm Isabella, everyone. Hello. Thank you all for coming. I helped be vocal. I helped vocalize this meeting to happen. So thank you all of my other partners in making sure this happens, and thank you, Stu, for also working with us as well. My proposal is that we let the locals who will be directly impacted from this dredging to go first. So that includes Vallejo, Crockett, Pinole, and Rodeo. So let's hear from the locals first, including Felicia as well. And then afterwards, those who live outside of that area will follow after that.
All right.
That's for comment, but there's questions first. Okay, I have a comment. I'm gonna start. I don't know how this will go from here. But I just want to speak up about, I know everybody's here with really good information and a lot of more informed stuff than me. But I'm concerned about the tone of this meeting, the setting of the meeting. So it's in an inadequate place, the parking's inadequate, the facility's inadequate, it's inaccessible to the people who might be concerned about this project, number one. The second thing I wanted to say is, I noticed on this map that it's called the San Francisco District Dredging Mission. Now, I have been involved in the military community long enough to know what the definition of a mission is. We will succeed no matter what. And this use of this word is a very poor choice, which is reflective of the attitude of the whole project. And then the last thing maybe that I'm going to say is that you have a plan up there, but you're saying we will, rather than we're planning to. So first of all, we don't want to open it up to everybody who might be interested. I don't know on Facebook, I don't take the paper, I don't know how I heard about this meeting, okay? So there's a lot of people that don't know about the meeting. Secondly, when we come here, we want to be able to be heard. So it needs to be a series of meetings. The planning, this part happens before you guys say we will. We're the ones that are supposed to say what will be done. And you mentioned it's a federal channel, so that doesn't even belong to us. So the federal, I don't know, maybe I misunderstood. But I feel like if it belongs to anyone, which it doesn't belong to business interests and military and government. It belongs to the people through those entities, perhaps. But this is backwards. It's upside down, and it's a mess. And I want to know when the next meeting is, and the next meeting, and the next meeting, etc.
Appreciate the comments. I was hoping to get questions
I have a
first.
question.
Thank you.
I have a question. I live in El Sabray. I guess that's too far away.
Go ahead.
People, Rodeo, Crockett,
I have a question about the EIR and a comment that you made about the pollutants that are in the bay, that are in the dredge material. You mentioned that it's 90% free of mercury and
Iron. Like,
Yes.
so ferrous is interesting.
Yes.
They refer
Lead,
to copper. They refer
Copper.
to lead
thank you.
and Montezuma and mercury. And Montezuma takes some material at low concentrations where they can bury it as opposed to leaving it where it can be mobilized by Bay tidal action.
Nothing on this planet can be buried. It's all here.
Tell the folks in Flint.
That's the comment, not a question.
Yeah, I know.
Thank you, you did
But
it.
no, I'm good.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna do here, and then I'm gonna go ding, 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 ding like that.
Please.
Local first?
Yeah, I live in Benicia, and so my question is, given what we know about the climate crisis, and especially the desiccation in California, the fires, why would we or even you be interested in a project that's really designed to benefit the fossil fuel industry and the refinery corridor? We should really be talking about how do we shut the refineries down progressively.
It's a reasonable question.
Thank you.
No, it really is. So, but you have to understand, I work for a government agency and I'm given instructions to do it. So one of the things, when Congress authorizes us and appropriates dollars, that in essence says, go do something to this agency and every other federal agency.
Stand down.
Yeah.
So Congress has directed you to do this?
Yeah. Now, remember, this project was originally authorized in the 60s.
So
So it was done a long time ago.
just a real quick follow-up, just for people's information, we've already met with Mark DeSaulnier's office, as well as Mike Thompson's office, Kamala Harris's office. We're trying to get a meeting with Feinstein so that there is no appropriation.
That's the way the process is supposed to work, in my personal opinion. And I applaud you for seeking out your electeds and putting comments into them so they understand how you feel. I believe that is a hallmark of the republic that we live in. One of the reasons I continue to work for the government, because it works. Ma'am. Ma'am, there's one behind you. Sorry, I'll get you next.
I'm a citizen of Pinole,
Yes.
and I spoke to the city attorney today, and also to the city engineer, and they have not heard of the project. Which, to me, seems to circumvent the idea of direct knowledge, because the Pinole Shoals Channel goes through the city of Pinole. And so if you look at that going through there, I'm very curious about how we let citizens know, how we let cities know, etc. So I appreciate your standing for the Republic. However, obviously, there's a communication version.
But I'd say no. And here's why I'd say no. Because you're here today having a comment. Don't forget, this is far, far from being done. And so part of the process is to capture input and so on and so forth. We try to publicize in accordance with the National Environmental Policy Act, which requires public meetings and comments. CEQA has the same requirements. And we do everything we can to get it out on the street and make people aware of it. Okay? Is it a perfect method? No. And I will agree with that. I don't know what is the perfect method to make sure, we're all busy, we all have time to get notices out that that the federal government is working on a study to do something. But I'm encouraged.
Cities that are impacted or potentially impacted by this are unaware.
Well, no, we're not going through this. No, they just through the city. It's a federal study right now. You know what? That's a point to make on it. The process of publicizing what we do, isn't perfect. we used to be required to put notices in newspapers. There are not very many of those anymore, you know. So so we attempt, and one of the challenges working for the government in this time right now is how do you push information out broadly to the public? So I'm all ears if you have a methodology that you think would work better than what we're doing, and I'd invite you to write a comment on it. Thank you for your comment. I will ping pong back and forth.
My name's Charles Davison. I live in Hercules. If you look at the map up there, on the upper right corner is Selby Slag. It's a California toxic Superfund site that was formed from 1872 to 1971 for metals refining for gold, silver, lead, and copper. That has been leaching into the bay for 150 years nearly. And if you look on the lower left-hand side, you'll see it's very light. That's the Pinole Shoals mud flats. That goes all the way to Point Pinole, through Hercules, Pinole, and even beyond, including Rodeo. So we're talking about several, maybe 7 square miles of very shallow mud flats. People have been caught walking out there. They've had to have been saved because they're stuck in the mud. And so my question is about Selby Slag. And Selby Slag is a toxic California Superfund site adjacent to Phillips 66 and the project's Pinole Shoal Channel, which discharges toxic heavy metals into San Pablo Bay, such as cadmium, nickel, lead, arsenic, and antimony. And the bay mud adjacent to Selby Slag and the nearby shipping channel, the Pinole Shoals shipping channel, has never been tested for toxins leached into the bay mud, but will be sent to the private Montezuma wetlands owned by developer Levine Frick for so-called, quote, ecosystem restoration. And so I want to know, I've looked at hundreds of documents from the Department of Toxics and Substances Control. Never have they measured any toxins beyond the asphalted top of Selby Slag. So my question is, has the Army Corps of Engineers yet analyzed the bay sediments near Selby Slag?
No, I don't have authority to do so.
But how can you say it's clean?
What I can say is the material we dredge is.
No.
Maintenance dredging material, which is shallow versus deep.
Agreed. I acknowledge the site's there. No issues with it. I don't have an authority to go after
Is
it.
it supposed to be in the plan?
No. So the federal channel, to go back to that, is literally you can map it. There's an extent from one side to the other and a length from one length to the other, and our authority is in that channel, period. We cannot, go analyze all sorts of stuff elsewhere if we, because we're not getting over it.
If it's adjacent to the channel, then the channel has that material.
Hang on. You guys keep going. So keep.
Oh, if that's adjacent to the channel, right next to the pier that you see there is the Pinole Shoal Channel. So we're talking about like several hundred feet almost from the channel itself.
Yeah, we still don't have authority. Ping pong. Next, somebody over here. I think you were the one right here.
So, you talked earlier about dredging beyond 30 feet, going to 38 feet.
35 to 38.
35.
Yep.
So, my question is, have all these channels been formally dredged, or what are you talking about when you said 35 to 38 feet? And is this virgin area that's going to be dredged? Has it all been formally dredged?
Yeah, we dredged the Pinole Channel this year
So
down to
annually
35
or
feet.
thereabouts as dredging takes place.
I'm sorry, Miss.
Annually or regularly is dredging.
Most
takes
of it
place.
annual.
And what's the purpose of this for annual dredging?
To keep depths for commercial shipping traffic.
Okay, and it's worked great for all these decades, and why does it need to be increased now? To increase the number of trafficking ships that can come in, port traffic?
Why didn't it go to 38?
Why do you need to be 38?
So just one thing I gotta say, the Corps of Engineers just doesn't dream up things to do.
Oh, condescending.
Okay. The Corps of Engineers does not go out and do that. We, in this case, had a project sponsor that expressed an interest in deepening the channel. that project sponsor, the Port of Stockton, was interested in increasing the depths for the full length so that they could do a better job of handling a lot of ag-related material traffic through. And that's where the stuff. You may not like that, but I don't know how to tell you it otherwise.
But you said that now they're not doing that.
We split the study into two. We are not going from Avon to Stockton, although they still have stayed on as a project sponsor.
Can you tell us who they are?
The Port of Stockton? Yeah, it's Port of Stockton.
Stu, local right there. Nancy, put up your hand.
I'm sorry,
You're on.
Oh, good. I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Nancy from Crockett is asking you to walk over to that big old display there. See that big orange arrow at the very tip top?
This one?
Yeah, the orange arrow.
This one?
No, the orange,
That
yes. Keep your
I'm slightly
finger there.
colorblind,
Keep
I
your
apologize.
finger there, don't move it.
Yes, ma'am.
Don't move it. This nice gentleman is pointing to the intake pipe of Phillips 66's once through cooling system. That slag mud area that Charlie just referred to being filled with corrosive heavy metals, that area, that water has that stuff floating around in it. How do we know? Because it gets sucked through that cooling system, goes through the refinery, cools it down, and then if you drop your finger down, you see the other, yes, there you go. It's spit out, warmed up, by the Rodeo water treatment plant, and the water has been tested positive for those heavy corrosive metals. Here is the deal. This is why Phillips 66 wants you to dredge there. Because if there are more ships and they're bigger, it's going to stir up that mud, release the heavy metals that are encased in that mud, float around in the water, it gets sucked up into that cooling system. 40 million gallons of bay water is sucked up in that cooling system a day. If the mud releases those corrosive metals, when Phillips 66 gets the approval to double the shipping traffic and to have bigger tankers, that corrosive water will go into the once-through cooling system and corrode it. This is an operational issue, an operational problem that Phillips 66 wants you, or us, to pay for. If you do not have a functioning refinery cooling system, you don't have a refinery.
Hi Stu, I'm Toddy, I'm Fresh Air Vallejo, and my taxes all my life have paid your salary.
Thank you.
Just want to make sure that's
I
clear. They're
love
all
it.
tax money. Great. Mine is a
Can you
request.
give me a raise?
No, I'm sorry. They cut off my job too. There you go. So my request to you is again to think about language. When Andreas said that he was approaching our elected officials and you said we have to tell them what we think, well, that is not the correct statement. The correct statement is tell them what we know and what we have researched. There are so many citizen scientists in this room right now, it's insane. So there are probably more master's degrees and doctorates than you can even realize. So we have to have the respect for the people not only who live here and breathe here, but for our knowledge, not just what we feel. And I'd really like to challenge, ma'am, they're not doing a great job. So the current thing, you said, oh, they're doing great now. No, they're not. They're not doing great. Even the 35 feet is not doing great. 38 feet worse. So 35 bad, 38 worse.
Noted. I will note that my son, who is an English professor, would agree that occasionally my language isn't great.
I have
unclear on two of the stopping points in your list of what's going next and how this progresses. You say you need a sponsor,
Yes,
and if you don't have a sponsor, then it doesn't move forward?
that is correct.
Okay, so.
Proceed.
But so who would sponsor this?
I don't know.
I mean, no,
What kind of company?
is it a company, or is it a town, or is it the government?
It'll be some government entity,
Probably Contra Costa County.
maybe.
And they would sponsor it because they want more shipping, or because they want better facilities for ships?
You'd have to ask them why
No,
they
I
do
know,
it.
why has it gone in, why was it sponsored in the past, and then it's not sponsored now?
It is sponsored right now by the Port of Stockton. It has been
Just them,
sponsored.
they're the only
Just
people.
them, yes.
And that's not good enough to keep going?
They're not gonna sponsor the CEQA component from the Bay to Avon. Now, that's today's news. Tomorrow they may change their mind. I don't know. But right now, this study does not have a CEQA sponsor.
And it doesn't have any congressional funding, so how is it gonna move forward?
That's a great question.
So like, this could all be moved, it might not happen.
Ah, but you'll know in future.
Where is Avon?
East Martinez.
Yeah, that's. Yeah, if you go back, it's about halfway down.
2 weeks ago, the Karen Mitchoff of County Board of Supervisors said that this project has been on their federal wish list for decades. So Contra Costa County government wants to see this because they believe it would enhance their northern shoreline development initiative where they want to reindustrialize the coastline. So that's the problem, is Contra Costa County Board of Supervisors.
Yeah, I can't speculate. My friend who coaches me on acronyms has had her hand patiently up.
And forgive me for this question, you may have explained it earlier and I missed it, but you had said this project has been, although, I mean, I understand it's not fully funded yet and blah, 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 but the project has been in the pipeline since the early sixties, but also the Corps has been working with the Environmental Protection Agency. And so did they like grant a permit or something?
Not yet.
Okay, but they would at some point be required to.
So EPA.
And federal EPA is what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I understand. So the Environmental Protection Agency works through the state and regional water quality board to administer the Clean Water Act.
So the EPA execution point is CEQA, California Environmental Quality Act. That's the CEQA sponsors we're talking about that would be required to go through the Cartagena Strait to Avon.
So typically EPA or the Water Board, Bay Conservation Development Commission are not project sponsors. They are regulators, and their job is to take a look at what our proposed plan is and ensure that we're complying with Clean Water Act, ESA,
And
things like that.
I didn't, excuse me, hang on. I'm sorry, I didn't.
A way to narrow down a set of potential projects. The other is to specifically look at the project that's being proposed to go forward.
Thank you.
Did I get that right? Somebody who's an expert? I just want, okay. Did I?
I'm an expert, but that's.
That sounds good? Okay. I'm just a government bureaucrat. I'm not all that. I'm supposed to be ping-ponging. Can I do you next? I'm gonna do you first.
Okay, thank you. I would like some more clarity on the authorizing bodies involved in this. You mentioned the Army Corps of Engineers, the study was authorized by Congress a long time ago. We have the Port of Stockton, which you might define this a little more, but they're obviously a key decision maker, authorizing body because they're sponsoring this project. You mentioned Contra Costa is a close partner. I'd like to know what that term means, and where does WISPA come in, since it was once on your website and it now disappeared from that. So are there any other authorizing players in this that have made requests or sent supporting notes in relation to this project.
I got 4 questions I heard in that.
Good,
So
but it's all
help,
about authority.
help me, to start with the congressional authority. The federal Congress writes laws that give the Corps of Engineers authority to go do something. Okay. There is also a second component at a federal level, which is an appropriation. So Congress has given the Corps of Engineers and many other federal agencies a bucket load of authority. They do not appropriate to support those authorities. Just keep that in mind. So there's a ton of stuff that potentially could be done out there, but there's not a lot of funded stuff that does get done. That's just kind of the way the system works. That's part 1. Part 2 was the Contra Costa special partner.
Well, we know that the Port of Stockton is the formal sponsor of this project.
Yeah.
So I assume that's a leverage point for why are you sponsoring it? But
So-
what is Contra Costa? You called it a close partner. And then are there any other
Yeah, I'll
close
get,
partners?
you keep reminding me of, let me do one at a time because I'm not. So, when the Corps of Engineers gets a sponsor, they become a fiscal contributor to the project. So Congress has directed us to find a cost share partner for our projects. For studies, the federal government will write 50% of the check, and some local entity writes a check for the other 50%. And that's what constitutes a project sponsor. That project sponsor. There we go. Third part is what was how did Contra Costa get involved? We have been having discussions along the way with Contra Costa to explore whether they wanted to be a sponsor or not. As of yet, this moment, they have not formally made a decision one way or another, but I really can't speak to their motivation or their processes. Recommend you talk to the county itself.
But you did use the word close partner.
Yeah, anytime we work with, I did, yeah, because they've been, Contra Costa County has, is a significant stakeholder not only in this, but a number of other activities that we do in the region. So we have a pretty decent relationship with them. And you had the final one, who else is out there? I cannot answer that, I have no idea. Well, there's nobody who's shown up right now with a checkbook saying we want to sponsor the next piece of the study. So that's still out there. You're next, and then you. I'm sorry, I messed up on you, and I apologize.
That's okay.
We'll get,
That's all right.
you're next.
So we understand, a number of us understand that what will happen is that right now, tankers can only be half loaded because they can't make it through the Carquinez Straits. So this will allow tankers to be fully loaded. So that means that in the case of an accident, there'll be more oil, more dirty tar sands, more petroleum products that make their way into the bay. And we are told that this will be a great opportunity for all of us consumers because then the oil companies will pass on the savings to us, not having to have so many trips because they'll have fully loaded tankers. Of course, we don't believe this, and I guess my basic question is, why in the world should we use our tax dollars to subsidize the oil companies, 4 of them? They're going to receive a subsidy of $15 million annually as a result of this, not to mention the increased profits they'll make, because this will then become much more, even more of a hub of trafficking oil, which will then pollute all of the areas next to this, which we know the most impacted people will take it the hardest. And why should we spend our money to make them richer and to enrich them at the cost of other people who are living on the fence line in these towns?
believe personally that's a great question.
Answer
I
it.
do. No. My job isn't specifically to answer that question. Okay, it really isn't. That's, you know, so part of the, you asked, you know, the little bit of the subsidy. Don't forget the Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund. So everybody who's doing commercial traffic right now is paying dollars into that, and everything but the study. The study will be paid for with a project sponsor and some federal dollars, but the annual maintenance comes out of that user fee that anybody who ships pays into. And I think the numbers on traffic end up, just so you know, end up being about 30% oil and about 60 to 67, 68% very non-oil traffic. Just so
We know that landlocked tar sands is going to make its way down here, and we don't want it.
That's, no issues with that. Beyond my authority, beyond the scope that I have to address that particular thing. It's just, I can't do a thing about it.
Also, can people who are outside possibly come in and sit around down where you are?
No, we're pretty tight over here already.
But where you are, is it possible to?
You can crowd up, I don't care. If you
Come
got,
on in if you want to.
I owe her next, and then I think I
Come on
forgot
in if
you
you
a long
can sit
time
on the
ago.
floor, or if there are older people, if people are willing to get up for them.
I'll get up if somebody needs to sit
There's
down.
one chair here. Come on in.
No, I got 1, 2, and then I got somebody else over there. Oh, you're pointing to seats. Never mind.
No.
Oh.
Don't do it. Next up to no.
There's another one here, any older folks? Sorry about that.
All right. I got 1, 2, and then you're 3. So,
More seats, if you need a seat, come in, it's here.
all right. Ma'am, kudos for you for recognizing something I should have to readjust the crowd to get everybody in it. Thank you for doing that for me. Ma'am, you have the floor.
Okay, the dredging of the bay can only go as far as Avon.
Where do you live?
Because
Rodeo.
Rodeo.
the dredging starting in Pinole will only go as far as Avon because they will get salt water in the delta. So how are you going to dredge there in Stockton and not get the salt water in the delta? This is a serious business. You know, you work for this company, but it doesn't have a very good record.
She's right.
I mean, Katrina,
She's right.
Indiana wouldn't have been as bad as it was if the Army Corps of Engineers or whoever didn't skimp on money, and that's why the levees broke and all the damage and people died. Okay.
Standing Rock.
In the Ileton flood many years ago in the 80s, I don't know what happened there, but they came and looked at the levees, and the farmer says, you better go home because the tide's coming in. Yep, the tide came in, all right. You guys had to go home. Not you, but whomever in the 80s. And it all flooded in Ileton. But those are just a couple things I know. And I also know that your funding is lasted through 2019, and you may not get funding next year. So anyway, I've asked you about the salt water, which you have to answer, I hope. But then, we went to the supervisors and we spoke and said we didn't like this problem with this dredging of the bay. And they acted like they have no authority, but yet it's all been worked on since the 60s or talk about it. Let me tell you about some of these supervisors. A couple of them, thank God they're not over here, we got troubles over here. They thought it was great for the economy. How the hell these people get elected, I don't know. They do. And it's wonderful. The only way they do listen is if we come many, and complain. But they acted like they have no authority at all. Now, Stockton was bankrupt. I'd like to know who bankrolled this situation in Stockton, because they were bankrupt at one time. This happened, of course, this has been in the fix since the 60s, but now they've got this beautiful port and they want to bring in bigger ships and probably a lot of storage tanks, which were called tank farms, which we've had that situation recently, and fires. Everything's screwed up here in the Bay Area, and we've got to keep speaking up. And there's no way that we can lay across the tracks or lay across the road out here at the Bay, but Maureen could show up with a bunch of little boats, and we could maybe keep them out. But this business of dragging the Bay, in the beginning you talked about it's a good thing, but we think it's a bad thing because of the big ships. I mean, if Phillips 66 gets what they want out of this, they will make down in Selby, where all the lead and whatever and all the arsenic is, they will put in 5 docks for 5 big ships. These big money people are the ones who's running this, and we have to keep fighting these refineries and kick them in the ass. I'm sick and tired of it. Our whole lives, and the grandmothers and all of us older people, we have to keep fighting because the younger people have to work and support their families. But we just got to tell our neighbors what's going on, and we have to keep fighting and go to these supervisors and tell them that they haven't given you an answer, then they better give you an answer.
Perfect.
But I want to know about the salt water.
Salt water is a great question. Salt water is actually the most interesting question. So my background, I'm a hydraulic engineer, hydrologist kind of guy, which is why I went a little bit sideways and talked a little bit about levees and the systems in there. There is a significant concern, and well, let me back up. There was a very large concern when we proposed doing the deepening from the bay all the way to Stockton on Salinity. Okay. One of the reasons that we separated the project into 2 components is we felt that the Avon location would reduce the potential for any salinity movement on the X2 line. So if you don't know what the X2 line is, the X2 line is it's the mandated thing coming out of the State Water Quality Board that drives releases out of Shasta Dam, out of Oroville Dam, and out of Folsom Dam to keep the delta salt-free so that they can pump water south for irrigation. That's what the X2 line's about. So there is a number of interests that have stood up and said, we are concerned about what this project might do for salinity in the bay. We did a pretty extensive analysis of the SF Bay to Avon piece, and what we discovered in a variety of different water years, that line would move less than 200 feet, I think is the number. Don't quote me on it, but it's really small. It barely moves at all. Part of the reason is you got enough flow anyways coming through it, it'll keep it out. You go deeper into the delta, it gets to be a bigger issue. You had a second question in there?
Well,
No?
you said how many, you studied and how many feet did you say?
It's about 200,
Okay.
200
Are you ever
meters.
gonna go up to Stockton, or what's the deal with
We're
Stockton?
not going to
Just
Stockton yet.
floating
No,
up
we've
there?
split the study into 2
So
components.
it's not happening, it's not going to Stockton.
We haven't even begun the study from Avon to Stockton. We early on separated that component. The original authorization went all the way through. Then we made the decision to break it into 2 components.
Is this X2 thing a new thing?
No, it's been around forever.
Okay, so what's going, I mean, I know there's new plans for the Delta, with tunnel. So how does this get coordinated?
The Corps of Engineers is not a water supply or water quality agency directly. Bureau of Reclamation and DWR are the agencies that represent those interests.
Okay, so you're not coordinating with them?
Oh, no, we
on this,
coordinate with them, and
or-
they certainly have commented on it. You know, so we've got their input, and I will tell you, it's no secret, they're concerned. That's part of the comment. I'm sorry, I'm gonna, you follow
Well,
on?
Salinity, just, I mean, if you're looking at Salinity and you're proposing a tunnel down to Southern California, are you compounding that or are you ignoring that?
We are aware there's a proposal to do that. It doesn't exist right now. It's beyond the scope of our authority. We're looking at the Bay to Avon. That's what we're
And
looking
what we need to be looking at is in the future and not just the next 5 years or 10 years, and look at what all these impacts are gonna have.
Well, I think that's a challenge for all of us. We're gonna have sea level change here.
Then you won't need to dredge because the water level.
But you got all sorts of infrastructure around the bay that will be inundated with sea level change. So you're right. The dredging requirements long-term, this is Stu speaking, not the Corps. Dredging requirements may go down in the future. We have, I believe, a long-term flood risk challenge for the bay that we need to start thinking about now. It is. It's a long-term big problem. I do that. Ma'am, I'll get you next because I owe you.
So, I think you're aware that most of us here don't want this to take place. People have said it in very eloquent ways already, and there's much more pent up need. And so you have talked a lot about believing in public input, and this is the second meeting I've watched you try to really facilitate that. And what I'm wondering, I have a couple of questions. One is, are you willing to do this as long as we need to do this for you to hear the public input rather than, 8 o'clock is a cutoff point at which point you keep moving on? In other words, what about, you used the sentence, we have been having discussions along the way with people who are the stakeholders. That is a quote. And that means, the people who have been sponsors, the people who have wanted this, whatever. I maintain that we are stakeholders in this, and we should also be ongoing discussions with you along the way, because each time we have one of these things, there are 2 or 3 new ways that we understand we might be able to subvert this process. And we need to have those ongoing conversations so it is not after things happen, but okay, the next thing that's gonna happen is X. The next thing is, we want an ongoing access to these discussions with you, and I'm wondering, do you have the capacity, the authority to do that? And how can we have that be part of the accountability indicator? Because you know that one of the things that's going to affect somewhere here is what's the risk factors? We all feel like these projects put the risk on the public and the reward on certain players. We want to make clear that actually the risk of doing this is much higher than people are figuring in. And this process, and allowing this process to expand, allows the communication about it to expand, makes up for that lack of newspapers that you were talking about. We need this ongoing process in order to make it clear to an uninformed public that this is happening, because the vast majority of us will stand up and say no if that's the process. So I am asking you, can we have that kind of ongoing thing as being part of what this process is, rather than this little 2-hour thing?
It's a great question. It's a great question. So, and I'm gonna tap dance a little bit for the answer, and I'll just. One is the portfolio of work that I have to do is far larger than this project alone. Okay, and I like to go home and see my wife and my son. And so there's a time element for me.
But maybe the other things
Hear me out. So, I believe in the public meeting process. I think that's important. And I think, for me, on this project, that because it isn't gonna go anywhere until we get into a CEQA process, which has a public engagement thing, that it will give everybody time, should it even get there, because let's be real, somebody said, look, why are we even bother talking if it isn't gonna go anywhere? You know, if we ever get to a CEQA process, then I think at that stage of the game, we can have a really robust public engagement process to weigh in there. It's a mandated thing that I think, you know, that we should keep up with. I mean, honestly, I don't know where this thing is going without seeing it. It just isn't going anywhere. So we've done, I mean, you guys are now collectively aware that this project has been put on the books. No, by Congress. Congress authorized and appropriated. They're the ones who tell me to do it. Let me finish, but, you know, so I know at least one person in this room has my phone number. If you're smart, you can look it up on the internet, and you can start calling me. Okay? Now, I'll do everything I can to answer calls. Okay, but at some stage of the game, I lose the ability to do all the other things in my job because you're taking that away. That, I would argue, may not be your best avenue. Just saying. That's a personal opinion, not a Corps of Engineers. So, hold it. I got now all of a sudden a bunch of hands. And I forget the order. You've already talked. So you're going to get postponed to the back end of it. I have somebody who wants to respond over here to that, to follow on, and then I'll start through this. We'll start picking. Are you next? Have your hand's been up a long time? You're next. Thank you. Thank you. By the way, I can't keep track of who raises hands when, and I would appreciate help doing that so I can do this as fair as I can. No, she's going to respond right now.
This is a quick response. Okay, she asked about us being stakeholders. The way CEQA defines stakeholders is official groups. You know, could be Indian tribes, could be, you know, governmental entities, but it does not recognize us as stakeholders until you get to public participation, at which point all the alternatives are already discussed, they've already picked their favorite, and we get to say what we want, and then we get it there. So just to throw a thought out there that stakeholders can be more than what you usually think of. It could be 1,000 grandmothers are stakeholders. So,
spot on. You're right. All right, who do I go next to? This? You're up, sir. And then we'll come over to you, and then to you. I promise. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's a circle. I can follow. So.
I'm aware that the NEPA and CEQA process requires public input. This is part of that package mandated by the U.S. government. But the question is, how many projects were stopped by the participation of public? Even they say no, I have not heard anything that of the public stopped the government project, especially for environmental related projects. Let me add, I worked for the U.S. Corps of Engineers way back, okay? I was in the Army. Then I was transferred to the Navy. I worked for the Navy. We did a lot of dredging. Nobody can stop the government, especially when the military, very strong presence in the Bay Area. I don't know what's going to happen. But in your opinion, do you think us, we here, I turned environmental engineer because of my frustration with this process. All the projects that we presented to the public, they're all just went through. Non-stoppable. Now the question is, in your experience, have you heard any project that would stop by the opinion or whatever a negative opinion
Yes,
of the public. Which one?
absolutely. Round Valley Dam, Cavello, California, mid-70s. Corps of Engineers, project sponsor, proposed building a dam up there. Hearings like this galvanized a lot of support against it, and eventually Congress rescinded the authorization to do the dam.
Well, the
Okay.
Congress is the one who
USS Missouri on boarding.
When do you get your,
following.
Sorry.
By rail, Phillips 66.
There are a number of projects that have been substantively changed as a result of public participation. Stopped? I don't know, but you know, I know Cavello because I'm a hydraulic. Covelo. See, I read it in a book, so I never got the pronunciation because I'm a geek on sort of that kind of thing on water policy. It has not been my job in the 18 years with the Corps of Engineers. I'm into this job for about a year.
Right now.
You got another project? Yeah, move on. Thank you. You're next.
So, the order, I understand that the Army Corps of Engineers has a long list of projects, some of which get done, and maybe some are put on the back burner. My question and suggestion is this, that the public have a voice in the order of projects incurred, that the order of projects, in my opinion, needs to shift because the environment that we're living in is requiring a large paradigm shift. And so that means the order of projects. So the levee issue, why is that not at the top of the list? You know, why are we talking about this before we talk about fixing the levees? And the other question I have is, there's still 1 million people living without drinking water in the San Joaquin Valley. 1 million. What are we gonna do about those people? Thank you.
You're next. I'm sorry. You're next.
I want to comment that from a slightly different perspective. You said the budget for this was approved by Congress 60 years ago.
No. The authority to look at it was in the 60s. The appropriation to do the study is only recent, 2010, 11.
So still 10 years ago. So my question is, you can't go anywhere until you have a sponsor, a fiscal sponsor, and then it goes to the CEQA. There's no one on the table who wants to be that fiscal sponsor. Why all of a sudden is this project even on the table? Why are you driving this to the top of the list? Because when you don't have a sponsor, there's no one driving it, there's no public demand for it.
I have a sponsor for the first piece of this work that we're doing right now. That's the Port of Stockton.
But they're not willing to sponsor the next step, so why are we even going?
Good question. I can't answer that for you at all. All I can tell you is the Port of Stockton has given us a check and asked us to complete this study to the point that we are completing. We are doing it.
Put it on itself and sit and wait 10 years.
I will tell you, the Corps of Engineers has done all kinds of studies over the course of the years where that's the outcome. We study it, we say, oh, you could do this, and we never get appropriations to do it. There are literally thousands of them.
what does the term fast track mean to you? Because it's my understanding that Trump has fast tracked this. What does the term fast track mean to you?
If this administration has put pressure on the project, I am completely unaware of it.
Oh. Are you familiar with the term fast track?
I am.
What does it mean? What does it mean?
Means,
Bureaucratically, what does it mean?
it means put it as a priority.
Yeah.
But I'm telling you, I don't know what happens at the highest level of government. From my seat, I have not seen that influence on this study at all. That's all I can tell you.
Hi,
Sign for me?
I'm
Yes.
Isabella Zizi. I'm with I Don't Know More SFA. Stand Up. I'm also a member of the Protect the Bay Coalition. This box is really heavy, and yes, this building is packed full of a little over 100 people who are really concerned about this dredging project. And it clearly states that we don't want this and we don't need this dredging proposal to happen. Also knowing that it is not financially capable of moving forward past 2020, and so us, along with 20,000 plus people, agree that this dredging proposal be put to a stop and put to an end. And I wanted to offer this to you.
Thank you. So I have to just laugh because we truly have moved to the digital age.
Even these big tankers decide too that they do not want any dredging, and they don't even want to be used for more tar sands or more.
Okay, boom, that was it. So I've lost track of who was next. So you got somebody there?
Yeah, I just have sort of a couple questions about the plan that's posted on the internet. When I went to review this, sort of in preparation for this meeting, you already alluded to the fact that there are some mistakes, like in the first two paragraphs that are pretty major. There's also a deadline for comments, that November 15th. But then there's a little clause under it that says we will make efforts to review comments after that. So in light of the fact that you're saying there's no particular rush with this because we don't even have a CEQA, anyone who's going to do that, why is there a November 15th deadline for comments? And why is there a statement that says maybe we'll consider them, but doesn't give any guarantee that you're going to consider any comments made after November 15th?
So straight up, we do that in a way to get people to get the comments in a period so we can manage them. The reality is we accept comments to the very last minute and we'll take a look at them and analyze them and address them as appropriate. What I will tell you, in many instances, what we get is comments that follow a theme, and so practically from handling that, what we will do is take a group of comments and say, these things are all generally the same. One of the reasons why you should write your comment as opposed to just talking to me, because the more specificity you put in your comment, the more attention we pay to it to be able to address it.
What's how do you do that? Give us the site to send comments. Do you know it?
Off the top of my head, no, but it's...
It's on the white little slips at the bottom.
White little slips at the bottom.
Yep, that's
Check
a
it out.
good...
That's
Just
where
a
you
follow-up
put the
question,
comments.
too.
You can email them.
Are you going to be making corrections to that first part of the statement so that it's accurate? And are there any other inaccuracies in that plan that we should be aware of? Because the one there that says, I think it says that Stockton is maybe, you alluded to it at the beginning, that, that WISPA was a sponsor and that Contra Costa County was a sponsor for this.
That was our website, not the report.
Okay, so
there's a
I'm
distinction.
having a problem. Yeah, I mean, where do you get the information if not on the website?
There should be a link, I believe there is, on our website that will take you to the draft report
That's what I thought I was looking at.
But I just wanted to be clear that,
I mean, it's 240 pages long, has
Yeah.
a lot of appendices.
yeah, and it's, so are there mistakes in it?
Well,
Almost
what you
certainly,
just
just
talked
'cause
about,
it's
the
your
first
size.
2 or 3 paragraphs, it talks about WISPA being,
No,
well,
that's,
maybe that was in the
that's the
summary.
website, that's
Okay.
a short blurb, we screwed that
Okay.
up, flat out, we screwed that up.
All right, and
Okay,
then
that, they are not project sponsors.
one other question is, you said at the beginning that Wilmington, North Carolina is in charge of one aspect of this, and I just have a question
They're
about
the lead.
why.
They're the lead for the planning study, because about 5 or 6 years ago, this region, so Sacramento district, San Francisco district, Los Angeles district, had a whole bunch of planning studies, and we did not have the people to be able to do them all. And so there was a decision made nationally, coordinated with our headquarters in Washington, D.C., to ship some of those studies to other districts that didn't have a lot of work. That's what happened.
And that's still the case at this point?
They are still the study manager at this point, and they will carry it through that first process. But I'm here, because at the end of the day, the San Francisco district owns the Corps of Engineers work for it. I'm your representative, for that study, even though it's being done over there. The reality is, we're 33,000 people. We typically tap all over the Corps to find expertise. So it's not uncommon for work that we're doing to have people from multiple areas across the country. That's pretty frequent in most engineering firms too. Yeah, that's relatively uncommon.
Who reads them? Who reads your comments?
Study manager, the environmental lead, other project proponents, depending on what the comment is. So if you write a detailed, for instance, hydrology comment on this, we will put that comment in front of a hydrologist so that they can look at it. So we presume that we're going to get good quality technical comments that merit a good technical person's eyeballs on it. We work really hard to do that. All right, I've lost track of whose hand is next. So help me out. You've had yours up. It's easier if I start knocking out the ones behind me and then I can see it. I'll try to get to you all. Your turn.
Okay, so you said the Western Petroleum is not a sponsor, but could they be a sponsor? Can you have sponsors which are not governmental entities?
I don't know of one. I mean, I don't know the law on that, to be straight up. I would tell you it's highly unlikely they would be.
Well, they're on the website.
We screwed it up.
But how? Why does that particular organization? Why not the Peanut Butter Association?
I can't answer that.
Really? You have no idea of what your interactions have been with WISPA?
So I will tell you, WISPA was a party to a lawsuit that the Bay Conservation Development Commission had against us. So it's not exactly we're totally in bed with them on anything. I have no idea. All I know was inaccurate. When you work for the government, you see some strange things every once in a while. So I'm going to go here, and then somebody's telling me I need to go there. Okay. Boom, boom. Then you. I'm going to work my way back. Is that cool?
Okay, so stakeholders. So all of us in the room are stakeholders, even if we're not a part of an association. And beyond that, all of the young people that have to work and can't make it to meetings like this, all of the people who don't have access to finding out about these meetings, stakeholders, and also the animals and the marine life are stakeholders. And who is really speaking for the stakeholders? Who's your experts that are going to be speaking for those stakeholders? What I understand right now is we're now 90% down of our kelp beds off the coast of California and beyond. The ocean fish stocks are due to collapse in the next up something close to 2040 or earlier if things don't change. How can we justify expanding oil carrying capacity into our Bay Area when we have a precious resource here. We've got biological hotspots up and down this coast, not just the people that are vulnerable, but our wild nature. If we lose the oceans, we lose it all. Absolutely.
Following up on the other communication.
Louder.
I'm a resident of Canal. I live just on the street from here, and I've just been hearing a lot of like limited authority and so many important concerns being raised. My question is, would it be better to follow up with supervisors rather than directly with Army Corps of Engineers and stuff like that for our concerns to be fully heard? Because there's so many.
I can't even touch that in an official position. I will tell you personally, touch them all. I mean, that's just the way, that's when it's effective. Straight up, talk to us, talk to your local, talk to the county, talk to your state. You know, there's multiple tiers of government that all can put their fingers in this. So, I'm working my way like front to back, okay? That way, because I think we're starting to get down.
So, it's been mentioned several times that almost everybody in this room, maybe everybody, doesn't want this dredging project to happen. You've been hearing our comments, our questions, you've seen our signs, we clap when someone makes a good point. So what I want to know is, what are you going to do with this information? Like, are you going to go back to the Army Corps of Engineers and say, hey, you know what? It turns out the locals really don't want this project. Maybe we ought to drop it. I mean, what will you do with this information from this meeting?
That, by the way, that key, Donnie, hang on to that. That has 20,000 signatures. The packaging is bad. No, it's a really good question in my opinion.
So, what's the
As
answer?
to what's the answer? You know, I'm doing the best I can. I'm sorry I'm not as fast as you like, but I'm gonna try. So, what do we do with it? We capture them as technical comments, one. So if you're getting into the science of it, we do that. If they're political comments, we note that through the study. I don't have the authority to do anything but capture them and address them to the best I can. So if you're talking about a political process, I can't do a thing about that. I really can't. We'll take your comments, we'll note them, we'll write them all up, we'll summarize them, blah, blah, blah. But the reality is I'm not given the authority to do anything that gets into the citizens are opposed to this project, other than note that the fact that that's there. That's a straight up answer. That's why you work with, when I say touch it, touch all of your electeds, because that's where policy is driven. Flat out. What, did I say something wrong?
And again, during the process, you have the authority to designate who the stakeholders are, and that's how you can draw us in.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. If you're the project manager.
I'm not the project manager.
Oh, well, shoot, what are you doing here?
I am, my job, and that's why I say is when you do it. I'm basically the deputy for the district for all the projects that we do. So
You're higher than the project.
I am.
Okay, then.
I am.
All right.
That would be great. I don't know that I can do it. I'm sorry, this woman, I'm going to like dance a little bit and try to do it. I will get to you.
Okay, so now getting informed, I want to recommend a really good article, the East Bay Express, September 11th article. If you guys haven't seen it, it's very thorough. And so some of the people who are being, who gave information to it are probably here. But I feel like we circled the drain a certain amount trying to figure out, well, will there be a sponsor? Is it really going to go forward? It hasn't gone forward for a while. But in the article it said a couple of things that seemed to make me feel like we do need to be worried. One is that the owners of planned Trans Mountain Pipeline is about to restart construction on the project. When the tar sands crude arrives at the coast, it will be shipped to refineries in the United States, including California as well as Asia. Bay Area refineries are already gearing up to process this heavier, dirtier crude oil. So Phillips 66 put in a request to a permit to triple the oil tanker deliveries to its wharf at Rodeo. So they're moving on it. And the exports from the Bay Area oil refineries have increased in lockstep with the decrease in domestic oil demand as refineries seek new markets. The Bay Area, this person from Communities for a Better Environment said, is becoming the gas station of the Pacific Rim. And we know that oil is being pushed by this administration, so I think this is a time when they've seen an opportunity to make the pipelines, to get the ships more to these refineries, which are already, Richmond Chevron is at 99.7% of capacity, others at about 90%, but they can step up production and then be able to, sell this oil elsewhere, if not here. And so this is a window for them to get permission to do all this, to push oil, which may close, hopefully, in a year or two. Okay, so that I do recommend this article, though, is very thorough about everything, including the impact on the environment, on the sea life, everything, which I also think we've just been talking about a little bit. That was just got brought up.
September 11th.
September 11th, East Bay Express.
I missed you.
And one tiny more thing. You said that how do you publicize these meetings? You used to have to put notices in local papers. Maybe you don't anymore. Support print journalism. Put the notices in.
As a guy who reads paper every day, like a real paper, I agree with that. Unfortunately.
What's that article called?
Dredging the Carquinez to accommodate oil. I got it from a link from Thousand Grandmothers. Yep.
I just have a kind of follow-on comment from there. How long does it take for a project like this to complete? The oil industry is a dying industry. Electrification is happening throughout the economy. We have limited resources and we should be spending them in the right way. We should be spending money on renewable energy and flood abatement.
Right there.
So there was a question, this is how long does it take?
Yeah.
The first phase of it will take about another 9 months to a year. But that gets us to the place where we're now going to start, we have to seek a sponsor and a project. So if you're saying when does it get constructed, I have no idea at this stage.
It's years, though, right?
Yeah, it was authorized in 1964. We're just studying it now. This is not, somebody used the word fast track. It's not really one of those, trust me, I've worked on fast track projects. This isn't one.
Right. I just want to mention one thing. Even though she was saying this isn't fast track, I know
Sorry. And there are also women of color who are raising their hands too.
Yeah, we tend to be invisible.
Got you back.
Sorry. I just want to remind everyone that even though Stu is saying this project is not being fast-tracked, Phillips 66 has already applied for to the Bay Area Air Quality Management District to increase the pollution out of their site, and all this area right here is their property. And I'm sure they are gearing up to use all that and to bring in those tar sands from that place in Canada that you're talking about. So even if this particular part of it doesn't get approved, there's a whole nother piece of it that's, they're putting it together piecemeal, so it doesn't look like it's a big thing happening, but it's a big thing happening.
I can see you
It's time?
So,
Okay, I heard the woman of color comment, boom, boom.
So since it's 10 to 8, will you commit right now to hosting another meeting in a bigger venue and further publicize public comment?
coordinate these things with a lot of other people. Studies being run out of Wilmington, the reports going to DC. This isn't something that is entirely in my control right now, so I have to make sure I touch base with the other folks who are still playing in this project.
Why don't they send us someone who can do something? You have to, you really can't do anything if you care that much.
Can you commit to making the effort to begin that?
Absolutely.
All right.
I mean, I'm sorry, I'm going to take credit. I didn't have to do this meeting. Okay? I did not.
Like, you're paid by our tax.
It doesn't, but under the law, I didn't have to do it. I made a commitment to doing it because I believe it's the right thing to do. I don't have the authority to address every issue that you all are bringing up. And I appreciate that. I'm going to do the best I can as a public servant, but I'm trying not to BS you. I'm going to give you it straight. I believe this is important. I believe public comment periods are important. I will strive to work with the folks who are running the project in Wilmington and in DC to see if we can do something. That commitment.
And then let us know.
Yeah, without a doubt. Yeah. Now,
So, LaDonna Williams, Vallejo, California. We have a small nonprofit, All Positives Possible, that works actually all around the area.
So we can hear you?
It's a long night and I'm tired.
We appreciate it.
LaDonna Williams, Vallejo, California. We also have a local community-based fence line, front line organization where most of us live around those shorelines and shorelands where you're going to allow this to happen. Why are you calling this a study? Like, we're all stupid in this room thinking it's just a study when we know it's already a done deal. Because you guys have already been in the room discussing this over the years of what you're going to do. The polluter's been paying into the fund, so you've allowed the big money folks to buy our lives, and then you label it a study that minimizes really how serious this is, because this ain't no study. Y'all not going to study this. You're going to put it in place. If we don't stand up and demand, you're not going to do it. Language, the least you guys can do first and foremost is change that language and call it what it is. It's going to be a project that you've already approved. You're just BSing us with these meetings, spending our time doing this, coming back and forth. We absolutely are supposed to give our input. You already know we're not approving this, and you guys are moving forward anyway. So basically, you need to be telling us the truth about what you're going to do, and I believe you're on our side. So we want to know from your insider view, who do we really go to? Because this ain't going to happen. We're going to shut it down. So we want to view you as a good guy on our side, okay? We want to do that. But if we don't, we're going to hang you out to dry. So I'm just saying, you got some heavy hitters in here. Tell us what's really going on. We already know. You guys are approving this thing, and for those of us in this room, we need to be rallying around how we going to stop it. Yeah, right. Yeah.
no, he's had his hand up very patiently.
Stoppable from Oakland. I just sort of became aware of this issue very recently, and I think it's important that it's not posted, it's not listed anywhere except I saw it on Facebook. I know there are a lot of really amazing organizations, but what I wanted to talk about is, yes, you're doing your best, and the human cost is huge. We all know that. We've heard the cost to the planetary beings, it's huge, but I want to challenge you. And what I want to challenge is, I think, great, you're coming in here on your own time to make this happen. Allocate some resources and bring a facilitator in so that you're not doing that and you're having to choose who to pick. Get a professional in here who knows how to make sure voices get heard, because there are a lot of voices not getting heard. And also, you said that you're going to report up and out what was said here. I don't see anyone taking notes. Great, but I don't see that it's being transparent, that there's a note taker, that there's clarification. People's names are not being taken down. So I would like.
So again, I'm going to go straight back to it. If you want to make a comment that sticks, write it on the form. Otherwise, we're translating it through our ears. So I appreciate it. I just say that's the way to get it.
I understand we can put our comments in writing, but you said in this room you're going to report up what was said here. But I'm not confident that you will be able to take the 50 or 100 comments and report it if you don't have a transcript of what was said in here. Will you have that?
agree. No.
So please come to a meeting with someone who can transcribe what was said so that it can become official, because my point is this. If you're reporting up, I would like to come in that you're going to be transparent what you're telling people. We should be able to see what and how you're saying it to the people above you so that we can hold them accountable to what has been reported in here. That's it.
Thanks for your